Something strange happened the other day, and I can't shake it from my mind. My best friend burst into my apartment unannounced and caught me in a moment that's etched into my brain forever. If you've ever shared a cramped space like a college apartment, you know privacy is a luxury you rarely get. You convince yourself you're finally alone, able to unwind after a grueling day, and then fate throws a curveball. My roommate and closest confidant, Jordan, is the type who never bothers with a heads-up text before showing up. He treats my place like his own personal lounge, crashing whenever the mood strikes. We've been living together since our sophomore year, so I figured by now we were an open book. Our habits, our schedules, our little eccentricities. But boy, was I wrong. It all unfolded on a Wednesday that started out as ordinary as they come. Jordan had mentioned he'd be tied up all evening, first attending a seminar on campus, then grabbing dinner with his project team. He even bolted out the door earlier than usual, backpack slung haphazardly over one shoulder, muttering about traffic and deadlines. So of course I assumed I had the entire apartment to myself for hours. No interruptions, no small talk, just pure, uninterrupted solitude. I decided to make the most of it. Really indulge in some self-care. I peeled off my clothes one by one, leaving just my cozy socks on for that extra bit of comfort against the chilly hardwood floors. I dimmed the overhead lights to a soft glow, killed the playlist I'd had blasting earlier, and let the quiet settle in. Nothing out of the ordinary, right? Just a girl needing to decompress. The gentle whir of the ceiling fan, the plush feel of my comforter, the cool breeze from the cracked window brushing against my bare skin. It was blissful. I felt liberated, like I could finally exhale. I sprawled out on my bed, phone in one hand, idly scrolling through social media feeds, funny videos, and recipe ideas for the weekend. I was positive I'd locked the front door. It's a habit drilled into me from growing up in a big city. Outside, the hallway buzzed with the typical apartment chaos. Neighbors chatting, doors slamming, the distant thump of music from downstairs. It all blended into white noise. Then I caught it, a subtle rattle of keys, followed by that unmistakable metallic click of the lock turning. I dismissed it at first, thinking it was the couple next door fumbling with their groceries again. But no, the doorknob twisted. Before I could even process what was happening, the door flew open, spilling harsh fluorescent light from the corridor into my dimly lit sanctuary, and there was Jordan. Mid-sentence, probably about to launch into some story from his day, but the words died on his lips. I froze, completely exposed, my body on full display under the sudden glare. We locked eyes, him hovering in the threshold, one sneaker already inside, his expression a mix of shock and confusion, jaw slack like he'd walked into an alternate reality. Time stretched into an eternity. My pulse thundered in my ears, every inch of my skin prickling with heat despite the cool air. I couldn't move. It was like my limbs had turned to stone. He stared. I stared back. Neither of us dared to breathe. Finally, he blinked, snapping out of it first, and stammered, "Oh shit, Mia, I'm so sorry." His voice cracked, unsteady, nothing like his usual confident baritone. I lunged for the nearest throw blanket, my fingers clumsy and trembling as I yanked it over myself. My heart was racing so wildly it felt like it might escape my chest. "You said you'd be out all night!" I yelped, my pitch higher than intended, laced with a mix of panic and accusation. Jordan just stood there looking utterly disoriented, his eyes darting around the room as if checking for hidden cameras. "The seminar wrapped early and the team bailed on dinner," he explained, his tone defensive but not hostile. "I swear I texted you, said I was heading back." I clutched the blanket tighter, my knuckles white. "I put my phone on Do Not Disturb." I shot back, trying to regain some composure. He eased the door shut behind him with a soft click, leaning against it as if the wood was the only thing holding him up. His arms folded across his chest, his face a mask I couldn't quite read, part embarrassment, part something else I couldn't pinpoint. I had no idea," he trailed off, rubbing the back of his neck, his cheeks flushing a deep crimson I'd never seen on him before. "What?" I pressed, my voice steadier now, though my insides were still churning. He hesitated, then we both burst into laughter, nervous, jagged, but genuine. It wasn't at each other's expense. It was a release valve for the mounting awkwardness. Jordan finally peeled himself off the door, moving with exaggerated caution, like he was navigating a minefield. He perched on the arm of the couch across from my bed, letting out a long sigh. I should have knocked, or called, or something. Yeah, you think? I whispered, still huddled under the blanket like a fortress. There was a beat of silence, thick and heavy. Then quietly he asked, "Is this a regular thing? When I'm not around?" I didn't hesitate. Yeah, sometimes. It's just nice to feel free, you know? No judgments, no expectations. He nodded slowly, processing, his eyes flicking to the floor. Didn't peg you for the full moon type, though, he quipped, a faint grin tugging at his lips, a callback to some old inside joke we'd shared about streaking at parties. I rolled my eyes, but a smile crept onto my face despite myself. I'm installing a chain lock tomorrow. Or maybe a moat. Smart move, he replied, his grin widening, but then it faded, replaced by a softer, more earnest look. Seriously, Mia, I'm sorry if I freaked you out. That wasn't cool. His voice was gentle, devoid of any teasing. I met his gaze. I'm okay, really. But he held my eyes a second longer than necessary, and something in his tone shifted. Just a hint, but enough to make my stomach flip. It wasn't just apology I heard. There was an undercurrent, something unspoken that made the air feel charged. The truth is, as mortified as I was in that initial shock, a small part of me didn't hate it. Not the exposure itself, but the vulnerability, the rawness of being seen without filters. That realization unnerved me more than the incident. I shifted under the blanket, clearing my throat to break the tension. Next time plans change, maybe send a carrier pigeon or something. He chuckled, but his eyes lingered, a new intensity in them that I couldn't ignore. Something had shifted between us, subtle yet profound. He didn't make a move to leave, didn't grab his stuff or pretend everything was back to normal. Instead, he stayed put, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, watching me from across the room. His gaze would dart, quick, stolen glances, then away like he was fighting an internal battle. I remained cocooned in the blanket, as if the fabric could shield me from the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside. But let's be honest, it wasn't the nudity that rattled me to my core. It was the intimacy of the moment, the way he'd seen me not just physically bare, but emotionally unguarded. He broke the silence again. It's not like I haven't seen you in a bikini at the beach or something. I arched an eyebrow. Bikini is worlds away from buck naked, Jordan. He laughed softly, a real warm sound that eased the knot in my chest a fraction. Then his eyes locked onto mine, and this time, he didn't avert them. I didn't mean to barge in like that, he said quietly, his voice dropping an octave. But now, I can't unsee it. Not just, the obvious. But the way you looked so at peace, real. I held his stare, my breath catching. Was he weirded out? Was I? Do you always feel that liberated when you're by yourself? He asked, his tone thoughtful, probing without being intrusive. It wasn't a joke. It was genuine curiosity, like he was peeling back layers to understand me better. I paused, weighing my words, aware of the invisible boundary we were tiptoeing around. Sometimes, yeah. It's exhausting always having to perform, to be on for everyone. Dropping the act feels necessary. Jordan leaned back slightly, his shoulders relaxing, but his expression remained intent. His typical laid-back demeanor, the one that charmed everyone on campus, cracked just a bit. Something fundamental had altered in the room. When he first walked in, I'd caught a flash in his eyes. Raw, unguarded desire. Curiosity? I couldn't forget it. It made my skin tingle anew. Instead of delving deeper, I tried to steer us back to lighter waters. I raked a hand through my tousled hair, feigning nonchalance. Well, congrats. We've hit peak roommate awkwardness. You've seen it all now. He flashed that crooked smile of his, the one that always made my heart skip a beat in ways I tried to ignore, adding witness to full exposure to my LinkedIn skills. I burst out laughing, the sound more natural than I'd expected. The tension eased, but it didn't vanish. It simmered, underscoring the words we left unsaid. "Sorry if I made it weirder," I murmured after a moment. He glanced at me, his voice softening further. "It's already weird, Mia, but maybe that's not a bad thing." That honesty hung in the air, weighting the silence between us. He raised an eyebrow, sensing my hesitation. I stared at the ceiling, searching for the right phrasing. "I don't know. Maybe I just need space sometimes from everything." "You're not alone in that," he replied after a pause, his tone steady yet vulnerable. "It's draining, always playing the role everyone expects. The funny guy, the reliable one, the unflappable friend. But if I let the mask slip, even for a second, the questions start rolling in." His words made me freeze. Jordan wasn't one for deep dives. He deflected with humor or distractions. And so his words made me freeze. Jordan wasn't one for deep dives. He deflected with humor or distractions. Hearing him open up like this was rare, intimate. "Questions?" I echoed, half teasing to lighten it. "Not outright," he said, a wry smile forming. "But you feel them, especially living together. The assumptions people make about us." The apartment suddenly felt smaller, the space between us shrinking despite the physical distance. I adjusted the blanket and it slipped a tad. His eyes flicked downward instinctively, then snapped away, but not before I noticed. Our gazes collided again, and this time we held it. There was an electricity in the quiet, not uncomfortable but potent, deeper than friendship, quieter than flirtation, more perilous than either. "I should probably get dressed," I said, but my body didn't budge. Neither did he. We lingered in that charged limbo, the silence pulsing with unspoken possibilities. It wasn't just awkward anymore. It was alive with potential. And that scared me more than the initial embarrassment, because this wasn't about a simple mishap. This was about what might unfold next. Jordan stretched out on the couch, arms folded behind his head, looking deceptively casual, though I could see the tension in his jawline. "You ever wonder about the stuff people leave unsaid?" he asked abruptly. I blinked, caught off guard. "Like what?" "Sometimes," he said deliberately, his eyes tracing the patterns on the ceiling before returning to me. "I think the quiet speaks volumes. We skirt around feelings we've both felt for ages, too afraid to give them a name." His words landed like a spark on tinder, igniting something in my chest. My throat tightened. Were we on the same page? His easygoing facade had vanished. Beneath it was intent, a quiet resolve. I swallowed hard, choosing my response with care. "Then maybe we shouldn't keep ignoring it. Whatever this is." He didn't respond immediately, just held my gaze, his expression inscrutable. Then slowly he nodded. "Yeah, maybe we shouldn't." The way he said it carried weight, a tentative step into uncharted territory, a boundary crossed with no easy retreat. In that suspended moment, everything between us transformed. We hadn't shifted positions, but the atmosphere had evolved entirely. I fiddled with the blanket's edge, not for coverage, but to steady my nerves. Across from me, Jordan remained still, his presence a quiet anchor in the storm of emotions we'd unleashed. "Here's a reimagined version of your story with different characters, maintaining the emotional depth, tension, and intimacy of the original while extending the narrative to explore the characters' inner worlds, backstories, and the unfolding of their connection. I've crafted it to feel fresh yet familiar, keeping the same heartfelt tone and pivotal moments, with new names and details to distinguish it. The story remains long, immersive, and true to the original spirit, with a focus on the emotional journey of two people crossing the line from friendship to something, or the air in the small apartment was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked pavement drifting through the cracked window. The storm had passed hours ago, leaving a quiet hum in its wake, like the world was holding its breath. I sat on the edge of my couch, a worn throw blanket draped over my shoulders, my knees pulled up to my chest. Across the room, Elias leaned against the kitchen counter, his dark hair still damp from the downpour we'd been caught in earlier. His hazel eyes were fixed on the floor, but every so often they'd flicker up to meet mine, sharp and searching, like he was trying to read something I wasn't ready to say. We'd been friends for 3 years. Ever since we met in a literature seminar our freshman year of college, Elias, with his quick wit and quiet intensity, had been the one to break the ice, tossing a crumpled note my way during a lecture on Mrs. Dalloway with a scribbled question. Is this book supposed to make sense, or are we just pretending? That was Elias, always cutting through the noise with a single, perfectly aimed observation. I'd laughed, scribbled back, and from there we were inseparable. Study sessions turned into late-night talks, coffee runs into shared secrets. He was the one person I could count on to see through my carefully curated calm, the one who knew when I was faking it. And I'd always thought I knew him just as well, until tonight. I cleared my throat, the sound louder than I meant in the quiet room. Are we actually going to talk about this, or are we just circling? My voice came out softer than I intended, betraying the nerves twisting in my chest. Elias exhaled, a sound that might have been a laugh if it weren't so heavy. He ran a hand through his hair, pushing it back from his forehead. Maybe both, he said, his voice low, stripped of its usual playfulness. There was something raw in it, something unguarded that made my pulse stutter. Elias was never unguarded. He was the guy who could deflect anything with a smirk, who kept his cards close and his heart closer. But now his eyes met mine, and there was no shield, no pretense. Just him. Didn't mean to throw you, he added, quieter now, his gaze softening. I wasn't trying to ambush you or anything. I shifted, the blanket slipping slightly, cool air brushing my collarbone. It's okay, I said, though my voice dipped lower than I meant. But it didn't feel like an accident. It felt intentional. He nodded slowly, like he was weighing each word before letting it out. It was seeing you tonight, Luca, not just, after the rain, your shirt soaked through, all of you just there. His voice caught and he looked down, his fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. It wasn't about you being exposed. It was you being open. Like I saw something real, something you don't usually let out. His words hit me like a slow wave sinking deep. I swallowed, my throat tight. Is that a bad thing? I asked, barely above a whisper. He shook his head, his eyes finding mine again, heavier now, softer but intense. No, just rare. He paused, then stepped closer, his boots scuffing softly against the hardwood. Have you ever felt like we've been avoiding something? Like we laugh too loud, look too long, pretend we don't already know what's there? The room felt smaller, the air thick with the weight of his confession. It was like the moment before a storm breaks, when the sky is heavy and electric, waiting for the first crack of lightning. I shifted again, the blanket slipping lower, and his eyes flicked down for a heartbeat before snapping back to mine. I saw the tension in his jaw, the way his throat moved as he swallowed. I don't know what this is, Luca, he said finally, his voice rough, like it was scraped from somewhere deep. I just know it's in me, like it's carved into my bones. My breath caught. What do we do about it? I asked, my voice barely audible, my heart hammering so loud I was sure he could hear it. He didn't answer right away. He just held my gaze, his expression a mix of fear and certainty, like he was standing at the edge of a cliff and deciding whether to jump. Then softly he repeated, What do we do about it? And in that moment I understood. We couldn't keep pretending. The years of late-night talks, the lingering glances, the unspoken pull between us, it was all leading here, to this quiet, trembling moment. I nodded, my pulse echoing in my ears. Elias moved then, slow and deliberate, crossing the small space between us. He stopped at the edge of the couch, the dim light from the street lamp outside casting shadows across his face. Highlighting the sharp line of his jaw, the faint scar above his eyebrow from a skateboarding accident he'd laughed off 2 summers ago. The air buzzed, alive with something dangerous and beautiful. Are we ready to fall? He asked, his voice low, rough with something so real it made my chest ache. I nodded again, words too small for what I felt. He sat beside me, the couch dipping under his weight, and the space between us seemed to vanish, like gravity had finally won. His presence was warm, steady, grounding in a way I hadn't expected. My fingers twitched, wanting to reach out but hesitating, not from fear of rejection, but from knowing how much this moment could change everything. Then his hand brushed mine, light and tentative, like he was testing the air between us. He paused, waiting, giving me the chance to pull away. I didn't. Instead, I shifted, letting my fingers curl around his, the warmth of his skin anchoring me. "You sure?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes searching mine. "No," I admitted, my voice trembling but honest. "But I want to be." That truth was enough. We didn't move closer, didn't need to. Just the press of our hands, the quiet connection was enough to shift the world. In his eyes, I saw everything. Confusion, hope, fear, and something softer, something that felt like possibility. His thumb brushed against my knuckles, slow and uncertain, but it was enough to make every nerve in my body hum. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was alive, pulsing with anticipation, like the room itself was waiting for us to decide what came next. Elias turned his head slightly, his gaze searching, not guarded or playful, but open, like he was seeing me for the first time. When I didn't pull away, when I let our fingers stay tangled, a small smile curved his lips, not his usual cocky grin, but something quiet, real, like a weight had lifted. "I don't know what happens if we cross this line," he said softly, "but I can't keep pretending this is nothing." His words landed like a truth I'd been carrying too long. I'd spent so much time hiding behind our friendship, burying what I felt because it was safer, easier. But now, sitting here with him, I couldn't hide anymore. I didn't want to. "Have you thought about this before?" I asked, my voice barely steady. "Not just tonight, I mean, us." He took his time answering, his eyes never leaving mine. "Yeah," he said finally. Not in a way that made sense, though. You were the one thing I told myself I couldn't want. Like wanting you would mess up everything we had." He paused, his voice dropping lower. "But I did. I do." His confession hung between us, not heavy but grounding, like it was stitching us together. I let the quiet settle, not out of fear, but because I wanted to hold on to this moment, to feel it fully. When I looked at him again, his eyes weren't confused anymore. They were nervous, sure, but clear, like he'd finally stopped fighting himself. "You're not just testing the waters, right?" I asked, my voice shaking despite myself. "This isn't some experiment?" Elias sat up straighter, his grip on my hand tightening just enough to feel real. "No," he said, his voice steady now. "I've been trying to figure this out for a long time. Maybe I don't have all the pieces yet, but I know I don't want to wake up years from now wondering what could have been." His words settled something in me, quieting the doubts that had been circling. I shifted closer, our knees brushing, the small contact sending a spark through me. Our breaths synced, slow and cautious, but so real it made the rest of the world feel distant. He looked down at our joined hands, a faint, nervous smile tugging at his lips. "You're trembling," he murmured, his voice soft but warm. "So are you," I whispered back. And that simple truth felt like it bound us tighter than anything else could. He raised his hand, hesitating before letting his fingers trace the edge of my jaw. I leaned into the touch, answering him without words. His thumb brushed my cheek, and the room seemed to shrink until it was just us, just this moment. "I keep thinking," he said quietly, "that one kiss could change everything." My heart stumbled. I couldn't trust my voice, so I just breathed his name. "Elias." He leaned in, slow and careful, his forehead resting against mine. The world stilled, the air thick with the weight of what we were about to do. "Tell me if you want to stop," he whispered, his breath warm against my skin. "I don't," I said, barely audible. When our lips met, it wasn't rushed or hesitant. It was deliberate, full of everything we'd been too afraid to say. It wasn't just a kiss, it was understanding, permission, a promise that whatever this was, we were ready to face it. He pulled back, that whatever this was, we were ready to face it. He pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine, asking without words. "Is this okay?" he asked, his voice soft but steady. "It's more than okay," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of it. I've wanted this for so long. His expression softened, like he'd found something he'd been searching for. He smiled, a quiet, trembling smile, and in that moment, I knew there was no going back. We'd cross the line together, and whatever came next, we'd face it as one. The night unfolded slowly, not wild or reckless, but careful, intentional. His hands were gentle, his touch reverent, like he was memorizing every second. My heart pounded, but it wasn't fear. It was the overwhelming realization that this was real, that we weren't pretending anymore. Every glance, every touch said more than words ever could. The apartment felt alive, the dim light casting soft shadows as we let ourselves fall into the moment, into each other. When morning came, the world felt different. Soft light filtered through the blinds, painting golden streaks across Elias's back as he slept beside me, his breathing slow and even. I watched him, the curve of his shoulder, the way his dark hair fell across his forehead. He looked peaceful, unguarded in a way I'd never seen before, and I knew this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a fleeting moment we'd regret. It was the beginning of something we'd both been too scared to name. I shifted carefully, trying not to wake him, but his eyes fluttered open. They were sleepy, soft, and when he saw me, a slow smile spread across his face, the kind that made my chest ache. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I whispered back. He stretched, then reached for me, pulling me close like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I have no idea what time it is," he murmured, his voice muffled against my shoulder. "Doesn't matter," I said, and I meant it. We lay there, tangled in the same blanket, the world outside our small apartment moving on without us. I waited for the panic to hit, the doubt, the fear that we'd crossed a line we couldn't uncross. But it didn't come. Instead, there was a quiet calm, like the universe had paused just for us. "I meant every word last night," Elias said softly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my arm. "It wasn't just the moment. It's you." My heart thudded, but it wasn't fear. It was relief, overwhelming and warm. "Are you sure?" I asked, needing to hear it again. He nodded, his eyes steady. "I don't know where this goes, Luca, but I know I don't want to pretend it didn't happen. I don't want to go back." "Me neither," I said, my voice barely steady. He smiled, leaned in, and kissed me gently, like he was sealing a promise between us. His forehead rested against mine, and he whispered, "We'll figure it out." There were still so many questions, what this meant for our friendship, for our future, for the lives we'd built together as best friends. But they didn't scare me anymore. His hand found mine, fitting perfectly, like it always had, and I knew we didn't need all the answers right now. We just needed this quiet, real moment where we weren't hiding anymore. Stepping outside later that day, the world felt sharper, brighter. The rain had left the streets glistening, and the air smelled clean, like a fresh start. We weren't just friends anymore, but we weren't boxed in by labels either. We were something new, something worth exploring, something worth building. Last night, as I drifted to sleep, I'd worried I'd made a mistake, that I'd risked the most important relationship in my life. But waking up beside Elias, seeing the way he looked at me, I knew it wasn't ruin. It was a beginning. Still, the doubts linger. I believe him, I believe every word he said, but I'm human. I overthink, I worry. What if this changes us in ways we can't predict? What if we're not ready for what comes next? Part of me wants to sit him down, to define this, to set boundaries and rules so I can feel safe. But another part, the part that felt his hand in mine, his lips against mine, tells me to let go, to breathe, to let this unfold naturally, the way it's meant to. If I were you, Luca, I'd choose the second path, not because it's easier, but because it's truer. What you and Elias have is rare, built on years of trust, laughter, and quiet moments that mean more than either of you realized. Defining it now, boxing it in with rules, might smother the very thing you're trying to protect. Love, because that's what this feels like, even if you're not ready to name it, doesn't thrive on control. It grows in the spaces where you let yourself be vulnerable, where you trust the other person to meet you halfway. That doesn't mean it's not scary. It's terrifying to stand at the edge of something this big, to know it could change everything. But you've already taken the hardest step. You've been honest with each other. You've crossed the line together. Now let yourselves explore what's on the other side. Talk when you need to. Ask the hard questions, but don't rush to pin it down. Let it breathe. Let yourselves breathe. You don't need to know where it's going yet, just that you're going there together. If you want to talk to Elias, not to define, but to share how you're feeling, your fears, your hopes, do it. Not to set rules, but to keep the honesty alive. That's what got you here, and that's what will carry you forward. Trust the connection you've built. It's stronger than your doubts. Thank you for sharing such a heartfelt story. If this touched you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Hidden Gay Stories for more emotional, authentic narratives. Let me know if you'd like me to expand on any part of this reimagined story or explore another angle.